The young child. I am Dr. Sewer, and I'm going to be sharing about understanding the young child. This is a monthly vlog that talks about different topics about young children. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about violent video games. So I'm on YouTube and I'm also on Facebook Live. So every 20th of the month, I do this vlog, and it's a video vlog where I'm sharing a screen now here on Facebook, and this screen is from Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School. So we're looking at violent video games, okay? I'm not going to name any video game companies or video game titles. I'm going to share what does the research say. Are video games really harmful for children? So that's what we're talking about today. And I want to let me get this situated here. I want to be able to share my screen. I'm not able to share my screen with YouTube for some reason. I'm not. Let's see. I can start a poll. So I'll start a poll on YouTube. And the question is, do you think violent video games are harmful to children? Okay. So that is the poll on YouTube. Now on Facebook, I can start a poll. Let's see. Yep. So I'll create a poll. Do you think that violent video games are harmful to young children? Okay. And either yes or no. Or you can say maybe. Maybe, not sure. Okay, so that's the poll. And let's return here now. Okay, so violent video games. This is an article that came out in 2010 from the Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School. And it's titled Violent Video Games and Young People. I also have another research article that came out in 2003. It's kind of an older article, but it looks at the effects of violent video games on young children. So this is a very hot topic because of the impact that the research is finding. So the Pew Research Center reported in 2008 that 97% of youths ages 12 to 17 played some type of video game, and that 2/3 of them played action and adventure games that tend to contain violent content. So what does that mean in terms of violent video game content? They talk about they use to describe games in the Grand Theft Auto series. I'm reading directly from this October 1st, 2010 article from that is out of Harvard Health Publishing. And this another research that I'm looking at is the effects of violent video games on adolescence and the overlooked influence of development. So when we're talking about children's growth and we're looking at, media, or we're looking at devices that, even screen time. Okay, screen time is linked to this as well. So when we're looking at violent video games and young children, where the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry is that exposure to violent media, including video games, can contribute to real life violent behavior and harm children in other ways. However, other researchers have questioned the validity or applicability of much of the research supporting this view. So they argue that most youths are not affected by violent video games. What both sides of this debate agree on is that it is possible for parents to take steps that limit the possible negative effects of video games. So, what are some key points? According to this Harvard health study out of Harvard, and we're also looking at the article. This article is coming from it's Aggression and Violent Behavior. It's by Stephen Kirsch, and it's 2010. It's called The Effects of Violent Video Games on Adolescents, the Overlooked Influence of Development. So, what are the key points? Much of the research. So I want to circle around here to this statement that this view endorsed by organizations such as the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, is that exposure, okay, when children are exposed to violent media, this is including video games. It could be violent media in terms of violent movies. That's why I don't like to see violent movies that are harming women, or women are being chased and hunted and attacked. They can contribute to real life violent behavior. So children who are aggressive, the research is showing that this is happening due to as a direct result of these exposure to violent video games. So when we're talking about, understanding the young child, because this is what this is about, it's understanding the young child and how we can support children's growth. We have to realize that these, video games can contribute over time according to research, and they can harm children in other ways. So we're looking at these key points, and this is out of the American Academy of Pediatrics as well as the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. So they argue, these two organizations are arguing that most youths are not affected by violent video games. However, what both sides of this debate agree on is that it is possible for parents to take steps. So that's my main goal of having this Understanding the Young Child podcast, is to inform parents and to give them the necessary tools they need to make informed decisions. So parents can take steps that limit the possible negative effects of video games. And these are three key points. Much of the research on violent video game use relies on measures to assess aggression. So they're assessing aggression and they don't correlate with real world violence, okay? So some studies are observational, where they observe children and they don't prove, cause and effect, that the cause of their aggression is because of the violent video games. So federal crime stats, they're pulling out some federal crime stats, suggest that serious violent crimes among young people have decreased from 1996, even as video game sales have soared. I don't know how these federal crime statistics, I need to see those statistics, right? Parents can protect children from potential harm by limiting use of video games and taking other common sense precautions. So, does your child wake up in the morning and go straight for a video game? That is where you have to draw the line in terms of common sense precautions. So, um, in its most recent policy statement on media violence, which includes discussion of video games as well as television, movies, and music, the American Academy of Pediatrics cites studies that link exposure to violence in the media with aggression and violent behavior in youths. So we have a theorist that looks at there's a study that's called the Bobo doll experiment. The Bobo doll experiment. And this Bobo doll experiment was done by Albert Bandura, who was around the 1960s. And he looked at the violence of actions being replicated by children. So let's see if I can share this with oh, my live video has ended on Facebook. Okay, let me okay, let's I didn't want that to end stop the live. My live has ended. Okay, let's go back again here. Okay, I have to retype this in. So, let's see. Okay. So let's share this. And this is about 3 minutes and 47 seconds.
Site early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down and beat it. It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials.
Okay, so that was okay. Okay, so here we go. My live video is starting on Facebook. So let's return here to YouTube. So I'm live here on Facebook and I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Probably not able to. However, I wanted, welcome to Understanding the Young Child. We had some technical difficulties earlier, but I want to share, I'm going to turn my screen around so you can be able to see this experiment that is done. Let's see if I can
Segment you
show
about
you
to
all
see is
that.
taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement.
So just by watching children watching violent acts, let's see what's happened to them after they've watched these violent acts. They're going to actually be, you know, mimicking these violent acts and even taking it steps further.
Learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet.
So the model is pummeling the doll with a mallet, as you see here. And the children are watching this.
Threw it down and beat it.
So if you're just joining me, this is Understanding the Young Child, and it's a monthly vlog that exposes parents to different topics that can help support their children's growth. Tonight's topic is violent video games. It's been on my
widely believed
okay.
that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the awful hostile language. The room contained varied play materials.
Okay, so that was one of the videos of the Bobo doll experiment. So let's return here now and talk about what we just saw. Okay, so what we just saw was aggression being modeled, and then children, after they've seen this, they mimic the violence, in other words. And what happens is, what the researchers are finding is that children who are not seeing this behavior, or this behavior is not being modeled for them, they're not likely, they're not going to pick up the toy gun and do what you saw in the video. So when children are exposed to violent video games, they are more likely to be aggressive. They're more likely to be in fights at school. They're more likely to be aggressive towards authority or adults. They become more aggressive, period. Okay, so I'm going to put a question in the poll here. Do you think violent video games make children aggressive? Okay, and either yes, and there's a poll here on YouTube, no, maybe, not sure. Okay, so you can go ahead and on Facebook, you can go ahead and answer that poll. When we look at violent video games and the effects, what can parents do? Okay, parents can protect their children from potential harm from video games by following a few common sense strategies, particularly when they're worried that their children might be vulnerable to the effects of violent content. These are some simple precautions, and this is from Harvard Health. It's from Harvard Health, and there's a ESRB rating, and I'm gonna go and tell you what that is. There's an entertainment software rating board, and they use this to describe the content of several games in the Grand Theft Auto series, one of the most popular video games series among teenagers. And the Pew Research Center reported in 2008 that 97% of youths ages 12 to 17 played some type of video game, and that 2/3 of them played action and adventure games that tend to contain violent content. So according to, this is a board, entertainment software rating board, that rates these games. And so parents should check the ESRB rating to better understand what type of content a video game has. Another suggestion what parents can do is play video games with your child to better understand the content and how children are reacting. Place video consoles and computers in common areas of the home rather than in children's bedrooms. Do not put video game consoles in the child's bedroom. I don't agree with having television in a child's bedroom either. They shouldn't have TV in their bedroom. Another thing is set limits on the amount of time youths can play these games. Okay, children are on these games for hours and hours on end, and they're used as a babysitter for parents. So we want to limit, parents should limit the amount of time youths can play these games. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 2 hours or less of total screen time per day, including television, computers, and video games. 2 hours or less per day. Now, I see children, I know some children who are on video games for hours, more than 2 hours. So 2 hours or less of total screen time per day is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Another precaution that may help, encourage participation in sports or school activities in where youths can interact with peers in person rather than online. So introduce children, have them participate in school activities and sports. On the island of St. John, where I'm from, I want to shout out to, Chief Clarence Stevenson and the group of basketball, even Chantel, who's, all the coaches basically, because you are actually taking children away from this screen time and giving them that interaction with their peers. So kudos to the sports, Parks and Rec. Kudos to those folks. They have a summer camp that they do, and I love that children are exposed to activities during the summertime, so that they're not stuck at home in front of a TV or in front of a video game. So we look at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that also talks about, this is another reference. So what can parents do? These are the takeaways that parents can do. Now, we look at the data, and in recent years, other researchers have challenged the popular view that violent video games are harmful. Several of them contributed papers to a special issue of Review of General Psychology that was published in 2010 by the American Psychological Association. And in one of the papers, Dr. Christopher Ferguson, a psychology professor at Texas A&M International University, argued that many studies on the issue of media violence rely on measures to assess aggression that don't correlate with real world violence. So when we, and even more important, many are observational approaches that don't prove cause and effect. So we have kind of two sides to this here. So I want you all to weigh in. Do you think violent video games are harmful to children? Yes or no? Do you think violent video games are harmful? Now, when I mentioned that parents should not have these video game consoles in their children's bedroom, that's a serious statement. But this is what is coming from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that placing video consoles and computers in common areas of the home rather than in the child's bedroom, just like a television. We don't want to put television in there, in the children's rooms. Okay. We look at the other piece of this is the U.S. Department of Justice has funded research at the Center for Mental Health and Media at Massachusetts General Hospital to better determine what impact video games have on young people. Although it is still in the preliminary stages, this research and several other studies suggest that a subset of youths may become more aggressive after playing violent video games. Okay. However, in the vast majority of cases, use of violent video games may be part of normal development, especially in boys, and a legitimate source of fun too. So, given the likelihood of individual variability, it may be useful to be aware that the impact of video games within three broad domains: personality, situation, and motivation. So we have these three domains: personality, okay? The three traits they identified were high neuroticism, prone to anger and depression, highly emotional and easily upset, disagreeableness, cold, indifferent to other people, and low levels of conscientiousness, prone to acting without thinking, failing to deliver on promises, breaking rules. So these are some of the things. After reviewing the research, they concluded that the combination of three personality traits might be most likely to make an individual act and think aggressively after playing a violent video game. Okay. Now we come to the other domain of situation. When we look at situation, the researchers found that certain situations increased exposure to violent video games, such as locating game consoles and computers in children's bedrooms and allowing older siblings to share games with younger ones. So, in this particular study by Dr. Sherilyn Olson, out of the co-founder of the Massachusetts General Hospital Center for Mental Health and Media, led a study of over 1,000 students in public schools ages 12 to 14 in South Carolina and Pennsylvania. And in this study, children who played video games, often with older siblings, were twice as likely as other children to play mature rated games considered suitable for ages 17 and older. So we have young children in first grade, second grade playing video games that are mature rated. Okay, so when we look at the situation, this particular domain, it's very serious what's going on. Motivation. So when we look at, the researchers concluded that video game play and other online activities have become so ubiquitous among young people that they have altered how young people socialize and learn. So how children are socializing with others and learning have changed because of these video games. So although adults tend to view video games as isolating and antisocial, other studies found that most young respondents describe the games as fun, exciting, something to counter boredom, and something to do with friends. So for many young people, violent content is not the main draw. So for many of these young people, these violent video games are not the main draw for them going and playing them. Boys, in particular, are motivated to play video games in order to compete and win, right? Seen in this context, use of violent video games may be similar to the type of roughhousing play that boys engage in as part of normal growth. So, video games offer one more outlet for the competition for status or to establish a pecking order. So there's some other researchers that are finding other outcomes, or they're finding these other results when it comes to violent video games. Okay, so that what I was reading there is directly from October 1st, 2010, titled Violent Video Games and Young People. And it's from the Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School. So when we look at this, I want to also bring in, to put side by side, this Harvard information along with an actual peer-reviewed journal article titled The Effects of Violent Video Games on Adolescents, the Overlooked Influence of Development. So adolescence is, 12-year-olds and up to 17, right? Excuse me. So since the late 1970s, one of the preferred leisure activities of adolescents has been playing video games, i.e., interactive games run on computers or video games consoles, right? However, due in part to a rash of school shootings perpetuated by adolescent boys, the effects of video games recently have become under scientific, public, and political scrutiny. For instance, several of the leading researchers in the field recently testified before a U.S. Senate Commerce Committee hearing about the deleterious effects of violent video games on children and adolescents. Although links between violent video game and aggression have been found, the vast majority of research has focused on children or late adolescent, i.e., college students. In fact, few studies have assessed the influence of violent video games on aggression during the age periods early childhood and middle adolescent associated with school shootings, and none of these studies assess the influence of violent video games from a developmental or growth perspective. So we need some more research on this, right? That's just what this is telling us. We need some more research on this topic. So when parents are deciding to get video games or deciding to stop their children from these video games, you have good reason. You have good reason to stop children from playing at least over 2 hours. 2 hours and then that's it, affecting their growth. So there's been studies, 11 to 17-year-olds. We need to study younger children, like early childhood. The studies that I'm looking at are 12 to 14 years old. And I showed you the Bandura video with the Bobo doll experiment. And this peer-reviewed journal article talks about the theoretical explanations for the link between exposure to violent games and aggression, and have been post-cited using several classical theories of aggression. One of them is Bandura's 1986 social learning theory, hypothesized that exposure to video game violence would evoke behavioral mimicking, right? It will reinforce already existing aggressive habits. So it's going to bring out these aggressive habits and increase internal arousal. In turn, this internal arousal could be interpreted as anger that increases the likelihood of aggression. So playing violent video games, according to Berkowitz's 1984 cognitive neo-association model of aggression, should create and or activate networks of aggressive thoughts, feelings, memories, and beliefs. An additional explanation for the link between violent video game play and aggressive behavior comes from the literature on social information processing in aggressive children. So in 1980, Dodge contends that aggressive children act aggressively in part due to a hostile attributional bias. That is, when exposed to a frustrating social stimulus, example, being bumped into a puddle, a hostile attributional bias results in cue distortion, that leads aggressive children to interpret the stimulus as an aggressive cue and thus respond aggressively. So social experiences such as violent video game play may lead to the formation of a hostile attributional bias. So violent video games, in other words, may lead children to misinterpret somebody bumping them into a puddle, stepping on their shoe as aggression, and then they react, right? So for instance, In 1998, Kirsch induced a hostile attributional bias in third and fourth grade children through violent video game play. So, this understanding the young child, like as I said, it's on the 20th of the month every month. On the 20th, I share a topic. I was supposed to have a guest speaker tonight. However, that didn't happen. So I shared Bandura's video of the Bobo doll experiment, as well as these two references from Harvard and from this peer-reviewed journal. So the Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School, as well as this article from the journal Aggression and Violent Behavior, looking at violent video games and the theoretical explanation for this in terms of, how this is definitely linked to theory, and the theory is manifested through the Bobo doll experiment. Sit. My dog is sitting there just staring at me. Anyway, so here are some snippets. Video game play across adolescence. So across adolescent, video game play is associated with gender and age, right? 8 to 18-year-olds play video games on average between 1.2 and 7.5 hours per week. According to this 1998 Dill and Dill, although adolescent boys play video games for more hours than adolescent girls, both male and female adolescents play video games on a regular basis. So boys and girls are playing video games on a regular basis. And then aggressive behavior across adolescence. So there's a pattern of video game play across adolescent mirrors the development of aggressive behavior across adolescence. So, for instance, in 1997, Lindemann et al. Assessed 11, 14, and 17-year-old responses to hypothetical interpersonal conflict situations involving two different types of aggression. The first conflict situation assessed direct aggression. Example, mean teasing, like you teasing the person, mean. And the second conflict situation assessed indirect aggression, spreading rumors. And, you got to look into that, the outcomes of that. Violent video games play a function of growth, okay? And when we're talking about violent video games, the importance of a growth approach to understanding or to becoming aware of the influence of violent video games. They're influencing children, and some parents might not think so. It's just a game, but whatever you are programming in your mind is what you're going to be programmed to do. So I really recommend, as a child development professor, as a doctor in philosophy of family studies, and as a parent, I do not recommend children playing violent video games. I do not recommend that. I think it's a big no-no. So answer the question, what do you think? Do you think that violent video games are harmful to young children? What do you think? Go ahead and answer that question. How the influence of media has done to Black people in America, right? The influence of media, the influence of what beauty is. And that beauty is not Black, that influence, that false narrative that the face of beauty is not Black, is non-Black. So we have young Black girls who don't see themselves as beauty because of the media. So it's kind of like the same philosophy in terms of how children are watching and playing these violent video games, and then they become that. They become angry, they become aggressive. It has aggressive effects. So the issue of whether or not video game violence influence aggression has been addressed for over 20 years, according to this article, this research article. Recent acts of extreme violence involving teens and associated links to violent video games have led to an increased interest in video game violence. So, in fact, violent video games, there's a researcher Anderson and Bushman's 2001 meta-analysis suggests that violent video games, in fact, do influence aggressive behavior, aggressive effects, aggressive cognition, and physiological arousal. So, the research is, I don't want to speak on the research being torn, but the research to me is weighing more heavily on the fact that violent video games, in fact, do influence aggressive behavior, aggressive effects, aggressive intellectual cognition, and physiological arousal. So, you can, comment, leave me some comments on what you think when it comes to violent video games and young children. Okay? So thank you for joining. I want to look at my poll on YouTube. My poll on YouTube asked the question, do you think violent video are harmful to children? We have a 50-50 split there. Half of people say yes, half of people say no. So I'm going to end the poll and only 2 people voted. So one said no and one said yes. So thank you for joining me for Understanding the Young Child. This has been Dr. Sewer. This is a video vlog, I would call it. I'm coming in every 20th of the month with a new topic. I may have a guest speaker in March 20th. I will be here again on the 27th of the month when I do Carla's Communication Corner. We talk about communication and how we can talk with each other better and communicate with each other better. Face-to-face communication, emails, communicating with your boss, communicating with your, professors, communicating with your teachers, communicating with your parents communicating with their children. So that is on the 27th of the month. Every 27th, I do Carla's Communication Corner. And tonight is Understanding the Young Child. So thanks so much for joining. And I do hope that you will leave some questions if you have questions or if you have comments. I don't know if anybody answered the poll on Facebook, but we're going to close now with a let's see. Let's close with, okay, I can't do that. My computer is running kind of slow on here. So oh my goodness. My bedtime is in 9 minutes. I go to bed at 7. Let's see. The National Institute of Health is another good source, and that's any source that ends with .gov is a good source. So the National Library of Medicine through the NIH has an article, and it's very recent, 2022. Albert Bandura's experiments on aggression modeling in children, a psychoanalytic critique. This is really good because it looks at the key findings of his experiments on aggression in children, and it has 7 different takeaways here. And I'll read a couple of them. Children transfer by means of generalization aggression into new, different contexts, even when the aggressive model is no longer present. It's called delayed imitation. So after they have been exposed to violent video games, okay, even when they have stopped the violent video games or that aggressive model, whether it's a movie or whatever, they may delay imitating it, and they may imitate it later on. So when the adult model is punished for his or her aggressive behavior, the probability that the child will show aggressive behavior is reduced. So in contrast, positive reinforcement or no reinforcement of the model leads to increased aggression on the part of the child. So after observing the aggressive model, boys tend to exhibit more physical aggression than girls, whereas no gender difference is found for verbal aggression. Independent of gender, children are more likely to imitate a male physically aggressive model. According to gender stereotypes, this form of aggression is more acceptable for men than for women. In contrast, verbal aggression is more likely to be imitated when manifested by a same-sex model. So, taken together, these results imply that children's aggression can be caused and probably eliminated by external manipulations. So, it's important to model for your child positive, loving expressions when dealing with conflict. Okay. So observation of an aggressive model is sufficient to elicit aggressive behavior in the young child. When the child sees aggression, that's what they're going to do. The model does not need to be a familiar or nurturing person. Moreover, there is no need to positively reinforce the aggression of either the adult model or the child. Because punishment does not follow the model's aggressive acts, the child receives the message that aggression is acceptable. So when parents say, if Peter hits you, hit him back, you're causing that child to be aggressive. And when they grow up and they beat you up, then you want to wonder why that's happening, because you taught them that aggressive behavior. Verbal aggression, yelling and cursing, and carrying on and arguing and having, violent verbal outbursts, is also one of the manifestations of the aggressive model. Verbal aggression. Okay, verbal aggression. So any questions, please leave your questions. And we are out of time. This is supposed to just be 30 minutes, and I'm on to 37 minutes on FaceTime. I'm on YouTube at 54 minutes. So I'm going to end now as I get ready to get ready for rest, because I will be on YouTube every rise with Chanta Sama Day. I do a Chanta Sama Day every day on YouTube. 5 in the rise. You can tune in on my YouTube channel. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get notifications of when I'm live. Thank you, Facebook, for listening. For those of you who tuned in, I hope you got something out of this. Oh, somebody is commenting. Pamela Jurgen. Thank you, Pamela Jurgen. Unfortunately, I'm not a miss. I'm a doctor, but it's fine if you refer to me as Miss Sewer. She agrees with me. She says that she always tells her students how to practice is how you're going to play. My son used to play a video called Landscape. It taught him about investment, banking, saving, and today he's successful based on that video game. Thank you for sharing that. So, why don't you share video games like that with your child? Investment, banking, saving. It's called Landscape. It's a video game called Landscape. Thank you, Pamela Jurgen. Bless you for sharing that. Thank you. I'm going to like that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pamela Jurgen, for that. Thank you so much. That means a big lot because somebody gave a suggestion about a video game instead of playing all these violent shooting and stalking people and killing people and getting excited off of that kill and aggression. Go and find this video game, this video called Landscape that teaches about investment and banking. This is something, especially in the Black community, we need this. We need to learn how to save our money. We need to learn how to invest our money, bank our money, and create businesses. So this is very important, and I'm thankful that we have somebody with some sense sharing that information. I'm not saying that because you play violent video games, you don't have any sense. Don't twist my language here. What I'm speaking of is that we have common sense, and according to Harvard, there is, they what can parents do? There's some common sense strategies. Miss Pamela Jurgen just shared a common sense strategy, particularly when you are concerned that your children might be vulnerable to the effects of violent content. Okay? And I shared with you some of those common sense strategies. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Pamela Jurgen, for your feedback and your comment. I really appreciate that because sometimes I feel like I am alone in this. And sometimes I feel that parents don't get it. And I know parents are the experts. I'm just here to support parents, to support children and families, because it's important that the knowledge that I have is shared and not just kept for myself. Okay? So thanks again. And I will see you all on the 20th of next month for another Understanding the Young Child. And see you on the 27th of the month for a communication podcast called Carla's Communication Corner. Have a good evening, everybody. Good night, and be good. And remember, take those video game consoles out of the bedrooms. Put it in a common area if that's what you want to do. And try to find video games that are going to teach your children about investment, banking, finance, and money. We have to change, and we have to change our mindset about money and how we use it, how we get it, and what we do with it. So thank you so much. Go out there and share this video, and I will see you again on another Understanding the Young Child. This has been Dr. Sewer. Thank you. Thank you.